with the theme Justice or Else. And
we have on the line, holding and being patient. We definitely thank you, Brother Eric Mahommad, co-chair of the Justice or Else in Philly. Thank you for holding on and being on the show, brother.
Peace, family. How you doing?
I am doing great. Now, I gave a little intro about what you do and your position. Just give our listening audience some more information so that they can really know all the great things that you're doing as far as being the co-chair of Justice or Else in Philadelphia. And then we're going to get into a dialogue about defining the Black Liberation Movement and how it impacts the recent 1010 celebration.
Well, I'm going to keep it real brief because that dialogue is the most important part. But the local organizing committee for Justice or Else, we pulled together a coalition of different organizations and different people, really, to pull off the demonstration of the gathering of 10-10-15, not for the sake of 10-10-15 that had like 1 million plus people that showed up in Washington, D.C., 1.5 billion. That's not exaggeration. 1.5 billion tuned in from around the country. 400 cities were touched. Justice Else hashtag trended top of all social media for 4 days. So there's a lot of participation. But the whole point of that was to mobilize and galvanize the people into one collective direction to go back to their various cities and get to work. So that's what we're doing.
Oh, good stuff. And that's what, how many billion was that?
That was 1.5 billion. Our social media strategist, Jesse Mahommad, he's the stats man. I'm repeating.
Okay. So y'all have someone on your media strategy pull that stat out. That's a great number. Now,
that's a crazy number.
Yeah, extremely, because it definitely shows the impact that it had there. So thanks for sharing that. So now, as we were talking earlier, giving the information about the segment here, all this month we've been talking about defining the Black Liberation Movement. We went over various different categories, and I want to get your intake on these categories. And I know it may not be in full length because we took a whole show to talk about these, and we're just giving you just this small space of time here. But I believe you can still share some wisdom and insight onto these topics in terms of defining the goals of a movement. I know you just shared about the 1010 and the things that are going to come thereafter, but what would be a way you could say you can define the goal of that movement and or any other movements that would sequentially follow thereafter?
Like Black Lives Matter or something? Is that a part of the movement?
I'll put it like this. I mean, the answer is simple. It's what the answer's always been. It's always about building the infrastructure for our liberation. Black liberation got to be more than a slogan. Our open enemy, white supremacy, they don't sloganize white supremacy. You don't see white supremacy bumper stickers. You don't see white supremacy, on top of the curriculum that they give to our babies, even though we know that that's white supremacy. They have an infrastructure to perpetuate their ideas. They don't just sloganize. So we have to get beyond sloganizing and setting up infrastructure that produces the results that we want to see.
What is that infrastructure?
Infrastructure, Neely Fuller, he outlined the different components of human life, education, health and human services. There are basic components that every human being needs. So we don't have our own educational structure, for instance. For all that we are speaking of, where are we sending our children to go to school? What is the infrastructure there? What is, like the incident that happened in South Carolina? All of us who are aware and conscious should not look at that situation as an anomaly. That situation is a byproduct of what that situation is designed to entail. The criminalizing of our babies, that's always been the agenda before any of us in that studio on this line right now were born. Criminalize us and to treat us in the manner in which we're trained. The school to prison pipeline is all part of that infrastructure. There's an infrastructure with a goal in mind. So if we are serious about our liberation, we would think about alternative educational models, homeschooling, education of our adults, parenting classes, self-defense classes, primarily a national education agenda for our babies. We need to divest of the system of things and begin to build our own infrastructure, independent schools. That's just one thing if we're talking about education.
And that's definitely a key, that component of education. We're coming up on a station break. We're going to talk a little bit more about this and flesh out some more understandings on how leadership impacts that and how do we or I impact the Black Liberation Movement. Coming up on the other side of the Shomari Show. So, Brother Muhammad, I want to read this quote from Dr. Samuel Penbum, who is an activist, author, and theologian in terms of, he's talking about the transformed mind. And he says, African American leaders all have often betrayed the people they lead because they see leadership as an opportunity to exercise unchecked autocratic power and amass wealth for themselves and their families and cronies. Where is black leadership? That's from Dr. Samuel Penbum. He's talking about the transformed mind. Where is our black leadership in your perspective?
Well, black leadership is all around us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we've been prepared how to even look at black leadership. Leadership is not a position, it's an action. Mm-hmm. There are those amongst us that take the lead. My first ideas of leadership came from my own household. The manner in which my mother led, not that all of her actions were 100% and accurate, but she took the responsibility of saying, well, these are the things you should be doing. These are the things you shouldn't be doing. Watch how I walk. Watch how I talk. Take the meat, leave the bone. Those are the essentials of leadership. Mm-hmm. So once you have some type of leadership relationship, you start to know how to look for leadership outside of that. Mm-hmm. Typically, when we start talking about black leaders and leadership, we tend to talk about some charismatic person that's in front of people that holds the bag for what we do and what we don't do. Mm-hmm. And the leadership, the point of leadership is to develop leadership in those that are following leadership. So if you find yourself sitting back on your couch, like, yeah, Malcolm, my man, Farrakhan's my man, that one's my man, that one's my man, no, I like her, no, I like her. And if we get into these senseless debates of what leader is better than the other leaders, if we're talking about Drake versus Meek, no shade on Meek, but, it's like we're having these philosophical debates, but our actions are not moving in accord with any of these people that we're talking about. So it's not to go back to that quote, that only can exist when people have accepted the role of sheep, where they're just looking for a shepherd. We're in a new paradigm now. Now we don't have to point to one leader. We failed with that in the 60s and the 70s. Now we can pull from a myriad of leadership, male, female, old, young, past, present, and do what we're going to do. So pick a field to work out in, and there's leadership all the way around you. It's not always the charismatic person in front of you. Right. It could be the guy sitting right next to you, the sister sitting next to you with good advice.
And that's for sure. If you want to join our conversation, 215-634-8065. It's 215-634-8065. Have calling in a guest, brother Eric Mahommad, co-chair of Philly Justice or Else, and we're talking about defining the black liberation movement. You made some good points about leadership there and the actions that we have to take. And part of one of our dialogues for the past few weeks, we were talking about the understanding, is it something that we collectively have to do, or is it something an individual has to do? Where would you stand? Where would you say it comes down to? Is it I or we?
It's both. It's both. There are certain I's among us. Like, I take it as a personal responsibility, being a man at 44 years old, that I know a lot of young 20-year-olds that are walking some of the same walks that I've walked 20 years ago. So it's my responsibility to help them connect the dots for themselves so they can have a quality walk over the next 20 years and not find themselves just walking around in circles. So, but it takes, there is the we, the collective, those of us who know, we need to be in unity. My biggest gripe against the so-called conscious community or conscious people is that if we're so conscious, then we have to be conscious enough to work in unity to create something that's a spectacle that attracts the so-called unconscious to want to participate in conscious activity. So that's where the we comes in. But as always, everything boils down to what the individual is going to do once the we start to do things. We is a collective of the I.
Do you ever see it being a situation where it's kind of a dynamic split where the we are doing something or moving in a direction, but the individual I isn't in agreement with that? And not that they're really being adversarial, but there's just an ideological fundamental difference there, and it becomes a split.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a thing wherein we believe that, because we don't understand, because unity is new with our people. We're only like 150 years away from chattel slavery, so we got to always keep that in perspective. Unity is new to us. And the idea of unity, we think unity means unison, when unity is actually the aspect of harmony. That there's a common goal, whether we understand there's a common goal or not. And we believe that we have to agree on everything before we sit down and make one move. Because if we hang out as homeboys, we know, like, man, I ain't trying to go over there. You know what I mean? I'm trying to go to this spot.
Right.
But if the bulk of us get in the car and say we're going to the left, either, you know what I mean, you catch up with us later, or we catch up, well, I ain't going to do that with y'all, I'll catch up with y'all, and y'all do this. Okay, when you catch up with us then. We're not going to not go somewhere because one of us just want to sit down and don't do nothing.
I got you.
So that's how the collective works. We get something done. We're in the mode right now with Justice at Ellis Philly. We're coalition building. And there were a lot of people that were called to the table, you know, to participate in 10-10-15. A lot of them just didn't see the need or what have you. Then I said, cool, I'll holler at you when we get back. And some of the people we're going to holler when they get back, some of them ain't going to want to do something. That's cool, too. In the words of George Bush, not the, you know, quote, old Bushman or nothing, but, you know, it's about the coalition of the willing sometimes. You know, and sometimes, you know, like you said, our people are not necessarily being adversarial. They just don't see it. So sometimes the 2 or 3 that do see something, you got to go do something for the other people to see it and go, oh, I see what y'all doing now. I didn't understand it when you said it, but now that I see it, okay, I can move with you now. So, you know, it's not a adversarial thing like you said. Sometimes it takes time.
That's for sure, and we definitely want to make sure we put that out there because there can be there's a dramatic difference between alignment and agreement. You know, we can disagree agreeably, but long as we're in line to make, like you were saying, a movement somewhere, we're just not going to stand around. So, thanks for sharing it.